So when we're solving for y, the whole goal is to get y by itself. That means that I want y's on one side of the equation and I want everything else that's not a y on the other side. So if I look at everything that's currently on the left side of this line, the 5x and the y are my terms. Well, 5x doesn't have a y with it. And that 5x is currently positive, so when I move it to the other side, it's going to switch, and instead of being positive, it's now going to be negative. And then it is now gone from the left side. The next thing I want to look at, if I'm solving for y, is the number that's in front of y. Well, in this case, there is a positive 1 there. So what I would normally do is this number in front of y, whatever that is, I would divide everything by that. But since the number in front of y is just 1, that means that I have solved my equation. So my final answer is y equals 12 minus 5x. And this equation is now in slope-intercept form. So again, I'm solving for y. So I want y is on one side, everything that's not a y on the other side. So the first thing I'm going to do is move whatever doesn't have y with it, which is this 6x, which is currently positive. So on the other side, it's going to be a negative 6x, and then it's gone. Now I've got to get rid of the number that's in front of y. The number in front of y is a positive 3. So I'm going to divide each of these terms by positive 3. And that cancels out the ones on the left, so I'm left with y equals 15 divided by 3 is 5, negative 6x divided by 3 is negative 2x. Don't forget that this x is going to stay there. It does not magically change to y. It doesn't disappear. Now, it's important to note that I cannot combine this 5 minus 2x together, just like I cannot combine this 15 minus 6x. Because this 15 doesn't have x and this minus 6x does, you can't put these together. Same with this minus 2x. You cannot put minus 2x with 5 because this has x and this does not have x, so they're not like terms. So I'm going to draw my line, label my sides. I have y's on one side, everything else on the other. First thing I need to do is get rid of what doesn't have y with it, which is this minus 12x. So to get rid of this minus 12x, I'm going to move it to the other side, and it's going to become a positive 12x. Now remember, I cannot put this this 32 and this plus 12x together because this has x, this does not have x, so they're not going to be able to be combined. Then I'm going to divide everything by the coefficient of y, which is the number in front of y. Remember that coefficient is a positive 4, so that's what I'm going to divide by because it said positive 4 here. Well, that's now gone on the left, and I'm left with y equals 32 divided by 4 is 8, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. So that would be my answer, y equals 8 plus 3x. This problem I've got to do a little bit more work because the first thing you probably noticed about it is that there's parentheses in the problem. So anytime we see parentheses, that means we have to distribute. We have to multiply what's outside the parentheses times what's inside. So 3 times 2x is 6x. And don't forget, you also multiply 3 times a negative 3. And a positive 3 times a negative 3y is a negative 9y. Equals 27. Well, now I'm just trying to get y by itself, so it's just like the problems I've been working with before. So I'm going to move what doesn't have y with it, which is this 6x. Remember, this 6x is currently positive, so now move it to the other side. It becomes a negative 6x. Again, I cannot combine 27 and minus 6x together because this one does not have x and this one does. So to get rid of the number in front of y, I'm going to divide. Now, it's important that you remember that we're dividing by what's in front of y, and what's in front of y is this negative 9. So I have to divide everything by negative 9. So the negative 9s go away on the left, and I'm left with y equals 27 divided by a negative 9. Just pay attention. It's a positive 27 divided by a negative 9. Well, a positive divided by a negative is going to give me a negative, and then 3. And then I have a negative 6 divided by a negative 9. Well, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. And then I can reduce 6 over 9, which is going to become 2/3. If you had your calculator, you could use your calculator to help you with that. Number 5, so again, I'm solving for y, which means I want y's on one side, I want everything else on the other. So the thing that's keeping y from being by itself is this minus 3x. So when I move the minus 3x to the other side, it becomes a plus 3x, and then it's gone. And I cannot combine my 18 plus 3x together because there's no x here, and this part has an x, so they stay separate. The next thing I'm going to do is divide by the number in front of y, which the number in front of y is a negative 9. So I'm going to divide everything by negative 9. So on the left side, those cancel, and I'm left with y equals 18 divided by negative 9. That's a positive 18 divided by a negative 9 is a negative 2. Then I have a positive 3 divided by a negative 9, which is going to give us a negative number, because a positive divided by a negative is a negative. And I have 3 over 9, which I need to reduce, and that's going to give me 1/3. Again, the calculator can do that. And don't forget to put your x with that. So now I have 3x plus y equals 17. So I'm going to draw my line, label my sides. Y is on one side, everything else on the other. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this 3x that is positive. When I move it, it becomes negative. And the next thing I would do is divide by the number in front of y. Well, the number in front of y is just a 1. And as long as it's 1, then I'm good to go. So that's my answer, y equals 17 minus 3x. For problem 7, I have negative 4x plus y equals 15. So I'm going to draw my line, label my sides. Y is on one side, everything else on the other. So it's a minus 4x on the left. On the right side, it's going to become a plus 4x, and then it's gone. And notice that y is already by itself because it's just plus y, so we're good there. So we're going to box that in because that's our answer. So next I have 5x minus 7y equals negative 21. So y is on one side, everything else on the other. So the first thing that's keeping y from being by itself is what doesn't have y with it, which is this positive 5x. So it's positive 5x on the left, it's going to be a minus 5x on the right, and that goes away. Now I've got to get rid of the coefficient. Remember, the coefficient's a negative 7y, so I'm going to divide everything by negative 7, so that negative 7 can cancel out, and I'm left with y equals. Well, I have a negative divided by a negative, which is a positive, and 21 divided by 7 is 3. And then I have a negative divided by a negative, which is a positive. I can't divide 5 by 7, and I cannot even reduce 5 over 7, so it's going to stay y equals 3 plus 5 over 7x. Number 9, again, I've got parentheses here, so I'm going to draw my line, label my sides. Y is on one side, everything else on the other. It doesn't change the way I have to eventually work the problem. It's just set up weird to begin with, so I'm going to distribute. A negative 5 times x is a negative 5x. Then I'm multiplying a negative 5 times a negative 2y. And I'm going to highlight these because I want to talk about this for a second. So I have a negative 5 times a negative 2y. And you've got to really pay attention to this because the sign is where you guys keep messing up. So I have a negative times a negative, which is a positive. And then I have 5 times 2, which is 10y. So it's positive 10y, and that's still going to equal the 40 that was already there. So I'm trying to get y by itself. Well, I need to get rid of this minus 5x, so it's going to become a plus 5x on the right side, so that's gone. Now I've got to get rid of the coefficient of y, which is a 10, and that's a positive 10. So I'm going to divide everything by positive 10. So I'm left with y equals 40 divided by 10 is 4. A positive 5 divided by a positive 10 is still going to be positive. 5 over 10 reduces to 1/2 x. So my equation would be y equals 4 plus 1/2 x. And our last problem, 25x minus 5y equals negative 35. I'm going to draw my line, label my sides. Y is on one side, everything else on the other. So I'm trying to get y by itself, so I need to get rid of this 25x that doesn't have y with it. It's a positive 25x, so when I move it to the other side, it becomes a negative 25x, and then it's gone. And to get rid of the number in front of y, the number in front of y is a negative 5. Remember that negative 5 is multiplied by y. The opposite of multiplying is to divide. So I'm going to divide all these by negative 5. And I'm left with y equals, well, a negative 35 divided by a negative 5, and negative divided by negative is a positive. 35 divided by 5 is 7. And then again, I have a negative 25 divided by a negative 5, and a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 25 divided by 5 is 5x. So my answer is y equals 7 plus 5x.